using the experience of Rwanda and Burundi, where similar groups had been established, and I had been able to work with these groups from my job. So that international contact group, of course, also became a pressure group to enhance the level and quality of assistance from the bilateral donors to the country. But also in my work as director of the Africa Regional Office, where Liberia was one of the 43 countries for which I had responsibility, working through the local UNDP representative here. We also gave support and encouragement to enable them to give relief, humanitarian assistance, and to also start some of the civil works program that started providing income to those who could do work for pay. So I feel very pleased with myself that although others may not know the scope of what I did, that I did my share.
Madam Sirleaf, for the past 150 years nearly, woman has never contested the presidency, and Liberia coming from war 7 years. People will say, why is it that Mrs. Sirleaf want to participate in the general elections? Why does she want to say, I want to be president after 7 years of civil conflict?
I think being a woman, as important as it is, because of the extra sensitivity that a woman brings to any endeavor, is not the real issue. I think the issue is, do I possess the qualities? Am I up to the task at hand? And I'd like to say that based upon my record of performance, both here at home in service to the people and abroad in the cause of African development, that I too possess the qualities that it takes to be able to provide the leadership for moving Liberia forward. And so I'm proud to be a woman. As I say, I bring extra sensitivity, which I think is important for the process of national healing, which will be required, that only a mother can bring. But I also think I possess fully all the other qualities that are needed. And I also have not only the strength of character, but the strength of purpose. And nobody should take me for granted because I'm a woman that I cannot deal with the issues relating to security, and that I'm not up to the task of dealing very forcibly with anyone who attempts to undermine the peace process or the security and the stability of this country.
Madam Sirleaf, you are an economist, and today our government is being run without a budget. This is not a good management practice per se. How will your government improve such a bad management practice?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because the total breakdown in institutional management here is one of the major shortcomings of good governance in this country. The fiscal indiscipline that characterize our society today is something that ought to concern all of us. Well, what we're going to do is to, first of all, define the role of government. We intend to reduce the size and the scale of government operations so that the private sector can take on a much larger share of the burden of development, where they can use their talents and be able to be supplemental. And so we will have a very lean, efficient, honest government. And when I make my statement today, we'll talk about merging several of the government institutions. And so that's one measure. The other measure is to look at the statutes and the laws, and they're quite clear. Even the Constitution all provide the means whereby we should have fiscal responsibility. It's just that they're not being enforced. So the next thing is to be a government by example, which means that we are going to see to it that those laws, statutes, constitutions, there may be some of them that may have to be reviewed and changed, but once we've put into place the measures to ensure it, we're going to, as a government, do what it takes. We're going to be a government that not only imposes rules and regulations on the governed, but those who govern must also live by the same code of conduct. And so that's going to be the measure we'll take. And if there are sanctions and penalties for those that violate those codes of conduct or violate those rules and those regulations as regard fiscal responsibility, we're going to deal with that. I hope, too, that through decentralization, which is one of the measures we intend to take, that we can put governance more and more in the hands of the people at the local level, and that, too, will lead to more efficiency in centralized government operations.
Madam Sirleaf, everyone knows that during a war, innocent people do die. Therefore, as a politician, why did you not use diplomatic means to iron out your differences with the then Samuel Kayando government? Instead, you chose to finance a war through the NPFL.
Let me use this opportunity to correct a very, very wrong impression, an impression that is being spread maliciously and falsely by Mr. Taylor and his group. Do you believe that I would finance a war and I would let somebody else take control? That's not anybody who knows me know that if I am in charge, if I put up my money, I am in control. What I did, as I believe many other Liberians did, in the initial months of what appeared to be a people's movement, we provided support. You know what that support was? A total of $10,000 that was raised from hundreds of Liberians in the United States trying to give support. Now you tell me if $10,000 financed a war. And these were the initial months. At the time, as I said, we thought it was a people's movement. We thought it was a pressure tactics, as the case of South Africa, where you had a political process and you had a quasi-military process providing that pressure on the government, and that was a response to the fact that the 1985 elections and the results of those elections had been undermined by fraud, and this was to bring pressure. As soon as it was determined that this indeed was a personal agenda of Mr. Taylor, who wanted to take power by any means and wanted to do so for his own personal enrichment and for his own gaining power, I immediately distanced myself from that. And so, you see, I think if people really look at my record, you will see a certain consistency in my support of the things I believe in. If they go right, or if I see they're going right, I stay with it. If they're not correct and I feel that they've lost purpose, as this particular NPFL movement is, I move away from it. I was never a member of the NPFL.
Well, do you regret any support you gave to the NPFL at the time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can bring back history. If I didn't really know Mr. Taylor, He was not any acquaintance, friend, accomplice of mine. The person who I knew that really encouraged us to give support was really Tom Wawiyu. And the reason for that is that Tom Wawiyu was a member of this group in the States that Amos Sawyer and I were members of, called Association for Constitutional Democracy in Liberia. And Tom persuaded us to help. Most of the communication that I had with the MPFL was really through Tom Wawiyu. And if Tom wants to be honest, he will admit that this is the case. Even whatever this funding all went, through him. So I did meet Mr. Taylor, indeed, and he has said that I met him in, I don't remember the name of this place. That one was my own doing because I didn't know the man. I went to Abidjan in May of 1990 for the African Development Bank annual meeting. And I was curious because that's my nature. I like to know things. And so without invitation, I said to myself, and the international press was there, and many of them today, like what's his name, Mark, I forget his name, he'll come back to me. They are around. They wanted to also see who is this man. I wanted to know who was this man because I was only getting it secondhand from Tom. And so I said, I'm going to go up to Danani and I'm going to force my way to be able to see this man. And I went up there and I sat in Danane for about 3-4 hours waiting for someone to go and get permission for me to go and see him. And finally, I did go and see him. And I went there and I sat with him. But when I got there, I was really disappointed. Because if anybody remembers squarely, and it came on the air, when I left there, I said, I see no vision in this man. Because all he did was to rant and rave about Moja and Pal and all this type of thing. And, and so I left there and I said, we're in, and that started the whole process of my distancing and my disengagement. I saw nothing in this man, but I stayed with it for a little while. The breaking point came, of course, when we went to Banjul. If you look at the Banjul papers, you'll see the first signature that organized the interim government of national unity is my signature. And when I went there, I tried to persuade Mr. Taylor, not himself, because I wasn't in direct communication with him, but through his people, the Cooper fellow who was over there, Tom, persuading them to come to Banjul so that there could be formed a true government of national unity that would have brought the war to an end. Of course, they did not come. Only Prince Johnson and his group came. And so from that, you may say that was the process of disengagement. Of course, also, what happened with the death of Samuel Doe. And let me answer your question on Samuel Doe because I didn't. People do not realize the relationship that President Doe and I had. It's a very complicated relationship because I think we respected one another. I think we're both, if you may call it, fighting people who do things in a very forceful way. But if people want to go back and look into history, you will remember that I was the Minister of Finance in 1980 when the coup took place. I was spared by Doe and the People's Redemption Council. I also gave that government as much as I could support in those early days because I believe this was a true people's movement by the widespread people's acclaim and support for this government. Even though I was a member of government, even though through some of those who were the revolutionaries, they started the downfall of that government by encouraging those people to put 13 people on the beach and shoot them mercilessly. But despite that, I still supported the Doe government because I said, this is what the peoples want. This is what the people want. It's time for political change in this country. And throughout those early periods, even though I ultimately left the government, I served as president of the Liberian Development Bank under Doe. And I left because of the same pressure of those revolutionaries who kept saying, this is our time. The old people must not take our job. They must go away from here. So ultimately, I did leave. But every time I came back to this country, I went, I met with Doe, I sat with him. I also went to the barracks. I also met with General Wesson. I met with General Thomas Kwiwampa. I met with all of them. I went to the Capitol building. You see, and ultimately, when the 1985 elections took place, our party, I was a founding member of the Liberia Action Party, which won the elections. And then when I came out of prison, President Doe sent for me, and I went to him. And he asked me, will you take your office? I said, no, I can't, because if I do that, I would betray the trust of the people, because they do not want me to take this seat as an expression of discontent and dissatisfaction with the fraud that was perpetuated. He said, what do we do? I did give him some ideas how we could salvage the whole thing. He said to me, go and write it, what you've told me. I went and I wrote it. A living witness to what I'm saying is Shea Tubman Jr., because he came to my house and I showed him what I was sending to President Doe. I sent it, but again, people advised him not to do it because I was one of the old people, and it was not the old people time. And so he did not do it, and that's how come ultimately he and myself got into this conflict. When Samuel Doe was killed the way he was, I felt extremely sad because he didn't really deserve that. And this was not what our political differences and our political movement was all about. And so, it's just that sometimes I try to not get into this because particularly in this political race, I wanted to stay above all of these things that represent dividing us. I'm trying to heal. I've met with Mrs. Doe in Abidjan recently as a process of healing. I've been to most of those who were high officials in the Doe's government, again to say to them, like I would say to those who were close to me, Jackson Doe, Kibra Pole, and their family, all of whom are on Unity Party ticket today, because they were mercilessly killed by Mr. Taylor. Again, one of the factors why I disengaged. I've gone to them and I've said to them, what we can do now is to make sure that all of these people do not die in vain, that we can make a new Liberia that's going to make sure that the healing is permanent, that development and growth in this place is sustainable. And if there's any reason why I joined this race, leaving a very important, well-paid job, is because I want to make sure that to the memory of all of those who have given their lives, we will indeed build a new Liberia.
Now, talking about reconciliation, it brings to mind about this long-standing debate about a miracle Liberian on the one side, Aborigines on the one side, the elite and the poor man down there. What's your own perception about this whole idea? Congo man, a miracle Liberian, the elite, the poor.
I think I must come down more on the side of Dr. Boyman Famule's characterization of this issue.
Yes.
In that I say most of the time the grievance in society comes between the have and the have-nots. Yes, we have a problem. I don't want to dismiss the problem that there was a miracle Liberian oligarchy and that there was the monopolization of power and privilege, something that should have been addressed in the society a long time ago. But I don't think today is an issue as it was. One, I think our society and the makeup of the people in this society are much more complicated and complex. I look at myself. If people see me when I walk down the street, and particularly they see the fairness of my skin, the first thing they will say is, I'm an miracle Liberian. Well, I'm not. I claim no fame. I lay no claim to American fame. I don't have any Americans in my background. I am three quarters native. My father was 100% Gola. My mother was half Kru, but half German, and which is the purpose for my fairness. And so there's so many other Liberians that fall in that category of being truly Liberians because they bridge this divide. That's why I'm saying that this miracle Liberian thing, I think over time, through the ward system, through intermarriages and all of that, there are many people here today who, how are you gonna put people who are strong, good native sons who have married white American women? What you gonna do with their children? How are you gonna characterize them? So I believe, like Dr. Famule said, that in society, increasingly, when you don't have a government that's responsive to the people, and disparity between incomes grow, and you have a small group of elite that are monopolizing the resources of the country, that they become so rich and ostentatious in their richness to the detriment of the masses, whose impoverishment is so visible. When you get that, then you get the kind of situation that we found here in the 1970s, and you set the basis for the radicalization of the society that leads to revolution. And that's how you may say was our revolution. I hope we can move forward and put this behind us.
At a press conference recently, Madam Sirleaf, I was made to understand that you said you were from Lofa.
No, let me correct that again. I said my grandfather, Chief Jar Mali, was born in Lower Lofa County. Lower Lofa County, as you know, is next to Bombing County. My grandfather was born there. And the chiefs there themselves have even, I don't remember the name of the town. They know the name of the town where he was born. But Chief Jar Mali subsequently migrated. And he came south. And when he came south, he came into Bombing territory, which is where he settled. My father, Connie Johnson, was then born in Bombing territory. and so I didn't say I'm from there. I was born in Montserrado County, but I traced my origin through my paternal grandfather to Lofa County and then to Bomi County. You can see my age now. I'm calling Bomi County Bomi territory.
Mrs. Sirleaf, we are less than 48 hours to Liberia's first multi-party elections. What are your chances specifically in other parts of Liberia? Because your critics say the enthusiasm for your support is only around Monrovia.
I wish my critics had been with me when I went out. I wish they had gone out to many of the places I have been. I am very, very pleased. I've covered every county except two, and I still hope I could get to those two Grand Cru and Riverses. I haven't got to, unfortunately, because of the road conditions and all of that. But I will still get to them. Even after the elections, I intend to go there. And the enthusiasm is so wonderful. The women of this country are ready. They're ready for a woman's leadership. But also generally the enthusiasm, I believe, is because they see in me the well-established track record of honesty, of efficiency, of competence, of courage, to be able to provide the leadership. And I keep saying to provide the leadership because what we want is to establish a team that reflects the diversity of this country, that's going to really go across party, across religious, across ethnic lines, and find the best and the brightest and put them to work in trying to meet the challenges that lie ahead of us. And so I believe out in rural Liberia, well, it's not over until it's over. Huh? I don't want to, I don't want to say, but I am just so overwhelmed by the response of the Liberian people and by the hope that I think my candidacy brings, because I see it in the eyes of the children. I see it in the eyes of the women. I see it in the eyes of the disabled, who we are going to have representation in Unity Party for the first time in the history of this country. I see it in the eyes of the impoverished, that they know we can deliver on our promises and that we can lead this country to the path of development, reconstruction, national unity.
Well, granted that come July 19, you are declared winner, what kind of government the Liberian people expect to see under the UPP leadership?
Well, it's not UPP, let's get it straight.
Leadership, sorry.
That's why I say so many P's in these things. That's why I say let's just say Unity Party. Okay. A government of inclusion. I've said that first and foremost, a government of inclusion in which we will draw from all groups, and we are going to make a strong appeal to all from the other parties. They're very able, competent, committed Liberians in all the political parties, and we're going to be asking them at that point to put the differences aside, to end the political battle, and to come and join us in reconstruction. Also, a government that's going to live by example. We're going to set the example for the principles that we're going to espouse. And I told you, as I mentioned before, we're going to have a lean and efficient government because we want to encourage the private sector, particularly Liberians, their resilience that they have shown in these past wars, in these past years where they've lived by their own wits. We're going to try to use all of that, and we're going to install Liberia's international creditworthiness so that we can attract the foreign capital and the foreign investment to supplement our own domestic resources to help us deal with the task of rebuilding.
Madam Sirleaf, it is alleged that most of those contesting the ensuing presidential and general elections on the UP ticket are defectors from other political parties, including yourself, and that your party has no roots, no die-hard partisan, but those seeking jobs in the next government. How would you comment?
Absolute foolishness. It's true that I was a founding member of the Liberia Action Party, which I say won the 1985 general elections. And I wish that we had not had a few manipulators because of the time I was going through this agony of trying to make a decision of whether or not to come home, even though I had received a strong call from the people in the Liberia Action Party. They are the first ones that started this call because they were unhappy with the small clique that had taken over the party. And so they wanted me to come home. But I was holding a very responsible position, and I needed to think it through. I needed to come and make a personal assessment before responding. Well, by the time I could get here, there had been this manipulation. Today, we find people running the party who don't even know what the party is all about. They're using a white rooster when our rooster was red, and they're talking about this, that, and the other. They don't understand it. These are people who never supported anything in 85. But anyway, let me not get into that. Let me just say that I do believe that those that have joined the Unity Party see the Unity Party as one of the three political parties of 1985 that were considered sister parties. Liberia Action Party of Jackson Fiado, Unity Party of Edward Binya Kesele, and Liberia Unification Party of Gabriel Kole were three parties working closely together. And for me, being with any one of them is like being with the other two. And when the election's over, you will see these three parties were meant to merge after the 1985 general elections. Hopefully, we'll do it again. And let me just call on all the partisans of Liberia Action Party. Don't let anybody steal your birthright. I belong to them and they belong to me. And that's why, if you see today, many of them are still with me, but I don't want to spoil your show with politics.
But you have any intention of going back?
Now, just before we come back to your question, Bob McGill, for our listeners up there, the program is Presidential Aspirants Live, coming to you from ELBC here in Monrovia. Our guest on the program today is the standard bearer of the Unity Party, Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Again, we'd like to apologize to our listeners that we won't be able to receive calls today on the program because of technical problems here in studios. We'll be taking a break now to return shortly.
Remember, waiting below me. You know this song, and wahala, where we belong to. So take your time today, and know waiting for you. Don't make that same mistake. Let tomorrow you don't go say if I be no. In 1962 election, now be free and fair one. Ben no be dead, kuku jumbuku no be dead. 1967, the opposition party na even winner. But 1973 election, problem in the day. The opposition party been boycott the election. And we all remember.
Yes, we're back on the program, Presidential Aspirants Live. Our guest in studios today is the Unity Party presidential hopeful, Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Madam Sirleaf, we have a question from one of our listeners. It says, your detractors say, although you work as Regional Director for Africa with the United Nations Development Program, your presence with that body had no direct impact on development programs for Liberia. Can you comment?
Well, look, I've just reviewed the things I did in that position. So you're asking me to repeat something that I've already said. I've already talked about how I was an instrument to help encourage this international contact group to get organized. I've already said how I've worked behind the scenes with the relevant and concerned United Nations agencies to ensure that humanitarian assistance reached here. I've talked about working with the NGOs and Liberian groups that had worked hard to try and provide assistance. I've also talked about the UNDP and the work it's done to be able to provide income to people as a means of them meeting their humanitarian needs. So I do believe that, I did much more from where I was even before I joined UNDP. If people will remember the late James Holder, how we organized an airlift with this group that we had organized for relief for Liberia, and he himself personally came and brought that airlift for the children of Liberia. I believe it was in December 1990, and it was a result of that he ultimately joined the Government of National Unity of Dr. Sawyer. So much of what is being said, quite frankly, are just people in opposition just trying to, and I hope they know better. If they don't know better, then please let me ask them, come talk to me and let me give them. The only thing I could not do, and I did not do, was to get up and make public pronouncements about what I was doing, because in my position, that was part of my job. I had to do it. I did it for not only Liberia, I did it for Angola, I did it for Rwanda, I did it for Burundi, I did it for other countries. It was part of my job, so I couldn't stand up there and beat my chest and say this is what I'm doing for Liberia, but I used the instrumentality of my office to do what I had to do.
Well, in Liberia, or in Africa specifically, Liberia, there's this cultural tendency where we see women to be responsible for the home, domesticate, responsible for the home, and besides that, nothing else to participate in. And this has created the problem of gender equity. Now, you as a female coming into the race, and come July 19, if
producers of African food and Liberian food are women. It's true that the men clear the bush,
yes,
because that's what they're suited to do. But it's the women who do the planting, who mine the rice, who take care of the rice. It's the women who do the storing of the rice and take care of it. It's the women who do the marketing. So women are the major productive agents and the suppliers of food in Liberia and elsewhere. Now, what happens is that is part of our traditional lifestyle. As we move from tradition to modernity, that's where the inequalities start. When there are educational opportunities, training opportunities, then the women get left behind, and the men then are given better opportunity. The young ladies get married off too early, they can't complete schooling. That's the type of thing that we're going to address. We're going to make sure that all young people get into school and have an opportunity to learn, to know a skill, and we're going to encourage. Obviously, much of this is going to be on the basis of personal choice and personal decision. You're not going to be able to force it, through laws or otherwise, but through education, coaching, we're going to make sure. And when it comes to the opportunity to exceed, the opportunity to take leadership roles at all levels in civil society, we're going to make sure that women have this equal opportunity. And if they are equipped educationally, professionally, to be able to do so, then we think what we then need is that little extra push, which is what we call affirmative action. The affirmative action that will correct the disadvantages that they have suffered over the years. And this is something that is growing all over the world. It's not just a Liberia thing, gender equity. It's a worldwide thing. And Liberia has already pledged to carry out the Beijing agenda for women. I'm going to make sure that the National Plan of Action for the Enhancement of the Role of Women in Society, as endorsed by Beijing, will be carried out and implemented to its fullest in Liberia.
Mrs. Sirleaf, during one of your campaign rallies, you said if you take power by July 19, hopefully, within the time frame of 2 months, you will pay salary arrears to all civil servants. Given the understanding that Liberia is just coming from 7 years of civil conflict, and which many have blamed on the lack of resources, how are you going to identify the resources to settle the salary arrears?
The reason why Liberia has been unable to pay its civil servants is because the resources of the country are being diverted from public use to personal use. Resources are going into the pockets of people illegally and improperly. And I'm going to make sure that the resources of this country are used for the good of the people in accordance with a budget that would be properly aired, debated, discussed, and approved by the legislature. But even that process will take a little while. To get the legislature functioning, to get the government functioning will take a while. So to meet my commitment of paying salaries means that we may have to get this financial assistance from elsewhere. That's my work. I know what it is to mobilize resources domestically and internationally. And this commitment to pay salaries fully, particularly the armed forces of Liberia. You've got soldiers sitting now who've not been paid for 13 months. I met with the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Staff, and all of their key people yesterday. And they tell me, even though they say out of 13 months, I believe they said, enlisted men were paid 1 month's salary about a month or so ago, and maybe they'll pay the rest of them before. This is a dangerous thing. And so that commitment is a real and strong commitment. Within 2 months of taking office, every arrears, legitimate arrears, because I don't want a whole lot of ghost workers. I don't want people coming with all of these lists, and I'm going to find a means to make sure that these are bona fide workers who have given their service to their country without receiving pay. And I promise the bona fide workers within 2 months they're going to get their salaries. It's going to be paid fully.
You talk about financial assistance coming from elsewhere. Have you identified the sources? And if yes, have they assured you?
Yes. Yes. I just tell you that this is part of my work. Organizing supporters, donors to be able to support the process of recovery, of economic recovery, post-war assistance is where I have some of my greatest strength, based upon my experience in development work. Liberia also has a lot of sympathy out there. We enjoy it from a lot of bilateral donors. The reason why Liberia today does not get as much assistance as it should is because they don't have confidence in the leadership, because those who are in power exploit this country resources for personal gain, because those who control the territory of this country use it to be able to extort and exploit for their own personal enrichment, and nobody wants to put their money when the money that belongs to the country is being so misused.
So how can a UP-led government put a stop to corruption?
First, by example. We're going to, first of all, put into office people whose integrity respected. We're going to review all of the laws and regulations and the code of conduct of society, and we're going to enforce them to the fullest. And I can say, I want to, with little humility here, that my own example of integrity and honesty is going to start with me, and we are going to set that example. I believe that the confidence I enjoy in this respect from the Liberian people and from the international community will set the tone, and people who work with me, for me, will know that they have to be honest. We'll try to pay them well, but if they're not honest, we will go by the law. There's going to be no improper and illegal action, but by the law, any offender will be dealt with.
Mrs. Sirleaf, poverty could be a contributing factor to corruption. So how do you plan to upgrade the living standards of the average Liberian?
That's a good question, because poverty is one of the most critical challenges that we faced in the next few years. And the first thing, as I said, was to be able to empower the people through training, through skills enhancement. We then want to deal with the revitalization of agriculture so that people who normally are self-sufficient in food can go back to their farms and be able to work. This is the means of addressing poverty. We want to encourage small enterprises by providing them the kind of assistance, technical assistance, capital assistance to enable them to carry on those activities that they've struggled with for their own self-survival over the last few years. But I don't want to fool anybody. I've always said when I go around that the task here is awesome. There's going to be no quick fix for the Liberia problem. Even if I'm heading a team, poverty is not going to diminish or disappear overnight. It's going to take several years of consistency in sound policies, of efficiency in the allocation and utilization of resources, of commitment on the part of the government and the people themselves, working in harmony and working with consensus for us to be able to show demonstrable results.
Now, Mrs. Sirleaf, look around you in the community. You see higher rates of teenage pregnancy, juvenile delinquency, prostitution, I mean, you name it. All of these immoralities are around us. And you, as a lady who has that moral for a psyche, what will you do to curb all of these vices?
A tough problem, because I believe all the things that you mention are the evidences of poverty. And so once we start to tackle the problem at its core, making sure that there are job opportunities for people, making sure that people can go back to their farms and produce for their self-sufficiency, helping people to be able to do their small businesses so that they are in a position to take care of their basic needs, making sure that the basic things that people ought to receive from their government, like clean water, like access to medical care, like education for their children, making sure that those things are available. That's going to help to address this immorality or, all the things that you mentioned. We're going to also have to have a lot of counseling, because too many of our young people, have just gone astray. They've just, where they've been lost in the last few years. So whether through the formal school system, or maybe we will have to institute some informal measures, whether it's I don't know. We'll have to think it through. Again, I like to say I don't have all the answers to all of Liberia's problems. I only have some ideas. I have an overall vision of where I'd like to move the country. But when it comes to tackling specific issues, there are many people out there who are much more able than I am, who have much better ideas than I have. So we want to start the consultation process to make sure that we take those ideas and those inputs and that we work them into a development plan. That's why we have not presented a development plan, because it's difficult to present a development plan when you have not had access to the whole country to be able to assess the problems and to understand them properly, when you have not consulted with the people and know what their ambition and what they would want to see. So all of those things will come later.
Mrs. Sirleaf, I believe if you were here with the people since the past 12 years, you will be occurring with the problems we have.
I think you misunderstand me. I can understand the passion of the people. I can understand the concern of the people. I can understand the inequalities that the people have. I can understand the lack of the security that the people have. I cannot fully understand what is needed on that farm in Lofa County. I cannot fully understand in Swedru or in some other place what they, as the people, consider their priority to be. I may think that their priority is education. And I say I want to prioritize education. But I may go there and they may tell me, yes, education is important, but we want roads because we can't even get our crops to market. Our crops are rotting on the side of the road. It's that type of thing I'm talking about when I say consultation is necessary to enable us to fully understand and be fully responsive to what the people want. We're moving from the imperial presidency to the accountable presidency. And I'm glad some people have picked this up. Imitation is the best form of flattery. And some people are already picking up the words we're using when we talk about two types of security, physical security and human security. People are picking that up too. So God bless them. They're helping to spread our message. But that's the type of things that we talk about.
Mrs. Sirleaf, that brings us to the question of national security. In about 6 months, ECOMOG, the West African Peacekeeping Force, will be leaving Liberia following the inauguration of the new government. What mechanisms would you put into place, or are you considering to strengthen Liberia's security?
Oh yes, indeed. We must ensure that we have the security mechanisms and security institutions in place to ensure the integrity of our national borders and to ensure the safety of our people, more importantly. The ECOWAS leadership has committed ECOMOG to remaining in Liberia for 6 months after the new government takes office, and they will use this period to be able to assist in the reconstitution, the restructuring, and the training of the armed forces of Liberia and the security agencies. I believe that that is a quite acceptable measure, that the 6 months period is enough. What's going to be important is the quality of that assistance. When I met with the Honorable Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff and their people on yesterday, they told me that they have already developed plans for this reconstitution and restructuring. They had even hoped that this process would have started before the elections, but they seem to be fully up to the task. I believe ECOMOG and General Malu, somebody with the strongest resolve I've seen anywhere, is up to the task. And so to me, that's good enough. I think we can manage. I hope we'll also get the international community to give ECOMOG the support that they will need to achieve that objective. And I just pray to God and I tell everybody, please don't try to destabilize this country again. The people have had enough. It's time for every Liberian, even you're part of a military faction, please join the process of peace and reconstruction. Do right by your people.
Madam Sirleaf, for 7 long years, the fundamental human rights of Liberians have been violated. Liberians have gone through the most dehumanized period in their lives. What's your comment on human rights violation, and how can a UP-led government put a stop to this? That's the first question. Secondly, what are your plans for those who committed war crimes against the Liberian people?
First of all, we're going to have to look at constitutional reform to ensure that the fundamental rights of the individual and the protection of those rights are enshrined in the Constitution. A lot was done in the Constitution that was done by the Sawyer Commission, but a lot more can be done because many other African countries of more recent independence have adopted stronger measures to protect human rights, and we may have to look at that. Our judicial system, which is the organ of government that is supposed to assist with the protection of those rights, would need a complete revamping to ensure that they not only have the capacity and the means, but they also have the integrity to be able to enforce the Constitution and the statutory regulations regarding the protection of rights. We also have to build the institutions that do this. In many countries, you have institutions. We have a few now, like the one that Kofi Wood heads. How can we give support to those institutions to encourage their autonomy and their independence so they can become a watchdog of even the government, the press, giving freedom to the press, to enable them to become a watchdog for the protection of rights, are all the things that we're going to do. Now, I don't want to see any witch hunt in this country. The wrongs that have been perpetrated are so many. If you were to start looking around and trying to find who has done wrong, we will spend the next few years just doing that. And I believe we need to look forward. I believe we need to encourage many of our misguided and manipulated young people which may have engaged in these unwillful acts to show contrition as we show our own bigness of heart, and so to bring them back. Having said that, let me say that if there's anyone who has a particular charge and particular evidences against one whom they feel did something willful to them, and they are willing to go through the rule of law to be able to charge that person properly and to show their evidence and give the person the right of self-defense, if they are willing to do that, we will then encourage it. Otherwise than that, I'm going to try to be heading the process of national healing.
So what happens in the instance that you don't win this election? Are you willing to work with any government who will be put in power?
Don't say any government. I will not work with any government. I will work with a government who's headed by those who share the principles that I believe in, by those who have the same honesty and integrity and are committed to peace and development. I'm not leaving this country again. Let me be very clear about that. I will be here. If I don't win, and I think I know I will win, but that's another matter. But if by any chance I don't, and a government takes place that I believe will deliver to the Liberian people what they want, I will work with that government. But if it's a government of exploitation and a government that is committed to personal enrichment and that have impoverished the Liberian people, I will be a part of the opposition, and they will never have one moment peace. They will not sleep. I will be on their backs.
Mrs. Sirleaf, probably finally, just in less than 2 minutes, are you satisfied with the electioneering process?
I am reasonably satisfied. I think the Independent Elections Commission, under very difficult and exceptional circumstances, have done a good job. This is why we said we're going to proceed with the 19. We haven't made any big call for postponement. And one thing that really excites me is that the Liberian people want to vote. That's my impression as I go around. They have caught the fever. They want to elect a good government. They want to see their problems and their issues addressed. They want to start the process of recovery and reconstruction and the process of national healing. And I think that they've responded to me. I do believe that unless somebody tries some kind of funny thing with a massive fraud, I do believe that Liberian people will speak on Saturday and that we will be called to lead a government, and we will invite all our colleagues who are committed to the things we are committed for to let us all join hands together for the rebuilding of our nation. We owe it to our people.
And as Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, she is the presidential hopeful of the Unity Party. We'd like to say thanks to all our many listeners. As we come to a close of this edition of Presidential Aspirants Live, we'd like to say thanks to all of you for listening. We have featured on this program 10 presidential candidates. 11 rather. We couldn't bring on Mr. Charles Taylor of the NPP and the Alliance presidential hopeful Cletus Wotorson due to time, not being to our favor. However, we hope to do better another time. On behalf of my colleagues, Winston Mongo and Bobo McGill, I'm Janet Johnson, thanking you ever so much for being a part of our program. Thank you. Ben no be dede, kuku jumbuku no be dede. 1967, the opposition party na imi win.
nation, and we all remember, if them we be happy.
This is the voice of peace, harmony, and reconciliation. We are to bring you programs of information, education, and entertainment. The time is a minute to sign of time. The climax of the Ellen Johnson campaign, which should have been held at the ATS, will now be held at the William V.S. Tottenham High School on 12th Street. All supporters should converge at the Tottenham High School beginning at 9 o'clock. Once again, the climax of the Ellen Johnson campaign, which should have been held at the ATS, will now be held at the William V.S. Tottenham High School on 12th Street. All supporters should converge at the Tottenham High School beginning at 9 this morning. All staff of the radio department of LBS are asked to attend a very important meeting at the LBS FM studios Thursday, that's today, July 17, at about now. Because of the importance of this meeting, disciplinary measures will be instituted against those failing to attend. From Monrovia, this is the voice of peace, harmony, and reconciliation. We are bringing you programs of information, education, and entertainment. Of course, the time is 11 o'clock, and we take a break now to come back at 12 midday for the continuation of good programming. On behalf of the management and staff of the Liberia Broadcasting System, my name is Sarah Brunel, bidding you a pleasant good morning from Monrovia. I'm wishing that you can tune in beginning at 12 midday for the continuation of programs of information, education, and entertainment.